Today's episode is a lot of fun. It is an interview with comedian Jeremy Nunes. He's promoting his new Amazon special. It's called Who's With Me? And I have no doubt by the end of this podcast episode, you're going to be like, I want to see this guy's comedy special. We had a ball. We talked a little wrestling, a little Last Comic Standing, corporate gigs, Hannibal Buress, and stay for the end. I suddenly wrap up the interview, and the reason why is amazing. You got to stay for it. Here's Jeremy Nunes. Hey, I know you have a podcast as well. Let me just start with an oddball question. How do you do your podcast when your wife insists on doing the laundry, when it's clearly on the family calendar? You have an interview scheduled at 4:15 p.m. Eastern. Like, I can't have the, but I'm doing my podcast fight.
I don't know if it's an option for you. I'm lucky enough. I can lock the door. And so I essentially lock myself into solitary down here in the basement. And she's got no choice.
Yeah, I'm in the basement too, but the laundry room is right next door. I've got the door closed. It's good for soundproofing because there's no windows or anything, but I did another interview right before this one, and I've got the lack of oxygen headache.
Well, I think it's all part of paying your dues in the comedy world. One thing or another, you're going to be in pain.
And the other thing, too, is trying to do the pod when the kids have been home with Zoom. You know, they're kids and they make noise, and it's really, you just sound like a total jerk when you're like, can you guys keep it down? Because Netflix pulled down Dave Chappelle's specials and I need to do a bonus episode of my podcast. Like, you just sound like an idiot.
Well, yeah, I have the same issue here. So we've got the kids that I'm like, I'm going to be on a podcast. I need full access to the internet. No one is to be on their classroom site.
The bandwidth wars. What are you using the bandwidth for? I'm stuttering. I'm on a business call.
Yeah, the worst is every once in a while I'll do a now they have us doing the online comedy shows, and I'm like, everybody offline. I need full access again. And my son's like, oh, I'm trying to do schoolwork. You're like, my comedy comes before your education.
I hadn't even thought about that, doing the Zoom shows as a performer in the bandwidth wars. Oh, my goodness.
And that's the worst also, because then you've got the, the timing is everything sort of deal with comedy. And, of course, you've got the internet delay. So sometimes it buzzes when you're trying to tell a punchline, or you tell the punchline, you're like, oh, they didn't like that. And then 3 seconds later, then the laughs come through and you've already started your next joke. And you're like, would someone just end COVID, please? How
is that, just not being able to truly react to a crowd? You lose timing, like you said. What's coming back to you? So I teach a college class, and when the college kids all have their microphones muted, I feel like I'm preaching into the void. And I'm like, can you guys just turn it on? I don't care if your dog is barking. So, like, I imagine you would want laughs back, but I was reading an article, Maj Jabrani talking about it, that, people turn on their microphones and then start making side comments like, oh, that was a really good joke there. I really like that one. How do you deal with all that?
Well, I tell them ahead of time also, please, have the mics on. Do not mute yourself, because I want to hear your laughs, and so do your friends and colleagues. At the same time, if you've got a maniac dog running around, please mute. And then I've been lucky. I haven't had anybody, with the side comments like the drunk guy in the second row. I haven't dealt with that yet, so who knows?
And are there Zoom hecklers?
Well, I've heard of such. I feel like they're bolder is what I'm hearing, because they know you can't just directly roast them because you're not face to face, from the front of the stage to the guy in the front row. So, I mean, a guy is 7 states away, so he can do whatever he wants, I guess.
All right, so I'd like to start with, and I already violated my own rule 4 minutes in, of just shooting the breeze about comics and your influences and who are you into. So, like, who do you like to see? Who do you like to watch?
My taste seems to change all the time. My humble opinion, the best working comics today, I would say Chappelle, Bill Burr. Nobody else is coming to mind that I think is better than those two. I would say those two are the top 2 at the moment. But sort of my influence.
Lorne Michaels agrees, by the way.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. And I almost said Louis C.K., but I pulled back, and so he'd be on board with that one too. And then guys that influenced me, in the beginning, I would say Jeff Foxworthy. The guy's been around forever, and heck, I remember wearing his T-shirts when I was like 8 years old. So he's probably be the first. And then I specifically learned to do guitar in my show because of Jimmy Fallon. So he's there also.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then I still do the guitar a little bit, but not a whole lot in my show. I still use it, but when I was in college, I largely turned the guitar from comedy to picking up girls.
Jimmy's really talented. I think at times he's been miscast on this version of The Tonight Show. For a while it was kind of clicking with, let's have John Hamm on and we'll play a board game. And then Trumpism came in and he lost his way. But then I felt like this summer on the pod, I recapped the monologues and the writing on that show was just on point. All summer, I was lucky enough back in the serious days to have Fallon came up and did Brewer's show. And you could just see there's a guy that's just naturally funny. It's not just the writers carrying him. I love him, his impressions. One of my favorite bits is his troll doll jingle. Say that 3 times fast.
Yeah.
I could see people eye rolling that bit, but it's a great bit.
I thought it was fantastic. And what I think is great about Jimmy, he's just so likable. And, I'm with you when the anti-Trumpism stuff came through. I don't really do politics in my show, well, national politics anyway, because I feel like whatever side you're on, roughly half the people are on the other side. So you alienate people. And I do think his ratings took a hit once he started making fun of Trump as much as he did. But yeah, doing the games and stuff with the celebrities, that was fantastic. You're like, wow, they're real people. It made them normal.
Yeah. I think Trump, it was too big to ignore. But, to your point, it's not what you go to Jimmy Fallon for. It's what you go to Stephen Colbert for. And the ratings proved it. And you've got Kimmel over there doing Son of Letterman. And, Jimmy does the other thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if that show really rebounds next year when things get back to the old new.
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, he's super talented. So I don't see him struggling. Again, I've always just tried to avoid politics myself, other than, local politics from when I was mayor. I talked about that. But the big stuff I tend to avoid.
All right, quick break. I want to talk to you about Jeff Foxworthy. So you mentioned Jeff Foxworthy. I had the pleasure of working with Jeff. I also see on your bio, clean comedian, and I will share with you a story way back when I had the pleasure of putting together Blue Collar Radio, sitting in the conference room with Jeff. And I said, explain your act to me. And he held up his hands about shoulder width. And he said, I can do what other comics do. I could drop an F-bomb. And I realized if I just work clean, I picked up the grandmothers and he held out one arm a little further, and the families and he held out the other arm a little further, and my audience just got bigger. So talk to me about working clean, because there's plenty of guys smoking cigarettes in front of a brick wall that would eye roll that you do work clean.
Well, and to those guys, first I would say I don't only find clean comedy funny. So like as I mentioned, Bill Burr and Dave Chappelle, I think are the best two working today, and I don't think would be classified as clean at all. But I personally prefer clean. One, because it's how I talk. I tend not to swear a whole lot in the first place. Got little kids running around, so I really try not to swear. But at the same time, as to add to Jeff Foxworthy's scenario there, I wanted to build a career in which I could have a very stable income in the Midwest. And to do that, you've got to be able to do corporate shows, and you're not going to be doing corporate shows if you can drop F-bombs throughout the show. You got to pull back. So that's kind of how I honed my skills there. So that got me a lot of corporate work, and being able to work super clean got me a lot of work in churches. And so in the Midwest, getting paid $100, $200 a show in front of the brick walls, as you say, I didn't have to do that anymore. I could make bigger checks for being clean.
Yeah, explain to the audience the good and the bad of the corporate gig.
The good is the paycheck. That's probably the end of the list. Well, they usually feed you. If you can imagine any corporate event you go to, there tends to be a couple speakers, like the boss or the executive leadership steps up. They say a few things. Then they have a dinner and usually get the join for dinner. And then after that, you are the performer. So I would say the difficulty, one, is these are people who've never put on a comedy show before. So generally, as much as you coach them, the room's not set up appropriately. The lighting's not appropriate. The microphone is garbage. But at the end of the night, well, and of course, these are not comedy fans either. They're not there to see you. And typically, the one thing preventing these people from leaving this meeting that they don't want to be at is you and your jokes. So you really got to bring it. And but again, at the end of the night, you get a nice paycheck and hopefully get referred to somebody else and do it all over again.
That anecdote reminded me of, I'm a big fan of Bob Hope, and I'd encourage people that only know Bob Hope from, age 80 and above, go study the young, quick Bob Hope. And when he used to do army bases, they would have somebody do, a little reconnaissance and be like, General Smith, he really likes tennis, make a tennis joke. And like Hope would work that stuff into the act, and just being like, rat-a-tat-tat, hey, yeah, I bet General Smith's off at the tennis court, would get a huge laugh because he had just tailored it for that particular audience. Do you have people walking up and be like, hey, our boss really likes tennis, can you make fun of him?
Well, they do have stuff like that, and I'll work it in. But a lot of times the people don't really understand. They'll be like, so-and-so just had to declare personal bankruptcy. Can you make fun of him for that? Like, I probably don't want to knock him while he's down.
The coworker we don't like. I see in your bio you did Last Comic Standing. I'd love to hear your experience with that show. I struggled. I'm not a performer. I'm just a radio guy. But I knew enough about comedy from the days it's serious that I'd put on the show, and it became problematic for me because my coworkers would be like, oh, you should have so-and-so on. He was hilarious. And I'm like, you mean the 8 seconds that they pulled out of the person's material was hilarious? You want me to give them a satellite radio show? So I'd just be curious your experience with Last Comic Standing.
So I got, what year? Maybe 2005, 2006, somewhere in that vicinity. I was a finalist out of the Chicago region. This is back when I think they were still living in the house at that time. So I didn't actually go all the way to the house, but I was a finalist in Chicago. And yeah, they showed like quick clip of me. And I don't even remember the joke at this point. It's been so long ago, but that's the thing. I did get some work out of it. 'Cause people were like, boy, that was a great joke. Do you want a headline over at the Chuckleheads? And I'm like, oh, okay.
I'll illustrate to people now. Like I said, I'm not a performer and I'm not funny, but I've got it's a really vulgar thing where I'll be like, so I just punched her in the imagined body part here, and it'll get a laugh. And I'm like, I didn't even tell you a joke. I just said something that shocked you and you laughed at it. I'm like, that's not comedy. It's 4 seconds.
Right. And then that might have been one of the clips where it shows I think it was the guys that were booking the Tonight Show at the time were the judges, and it cuts back to those guys shaking their heads in the back like, yeah. But I remember waiting in line. I started out in Chicago. I was standing in the line. I had if you know Michael Palisak and Hannibal Buress, we were both in line, all three of us waiting for our shot.
I love Hannibal. I tell the story on the pod all the time of just going back when they had the JFL Chicago. It was a rainy Wednesday night. Went to whatever random show I think Madigan was hosting, and Hannibal got up there and he just crushed, and you just knew like, oh, right, this guy's coming.
I could tell you a story. I knew Hannibal long before that. We started together in Carbondale, Illinois. We went to Southern Illinois University together, and there was a little bar there that had a one-nighter weekly show. And Hannibal and I were two of the sort of like the local guys that got to rotate and they gave you all of 2 minutes to perform in front of the nationally touring guys that would come through. And, of course, neither of us had been doing comedy very long at the time, and, went back to Chicago after college, and I'd cross paths with him every once in a while at clubs, and, still both of us cutting our teeth. And, eventually probably 3 or 4 years go by, and I think at the time featuring at Zany's in Chicago. And, the manager said, hey, I need you to, cut 5 minutes. I've got a guy, going to try to cut a 5-minute demo to get on Craig Ferguson. And I was like, who is it? And he said, Hannibal Buress. And I was like, no way, I haven't seen Hannibal forever. And then Hannibal goes up and just absolutely destroys the room. And I was like, wow, he figured it out. And just like you said, I knew, boy, he's going to blow up.
He's so good. How do they judge anybody on 2 minutes though?
Well, that wasn't being judged. That was just the local bar trying to give some time to the local comedian.